The following talk, cassette number 22, was delivered by Dr. Herbert M Shelton at Washington, D.C. in July 1955.
Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you a gentleman whom you all know and respect and admire, who will speak to you on the subject of vitamins and minerals in nutrition, Dr. Herbert M Shelton of San Antonio, Texas.
You know, they always put me on last and then let all these long-winded talkers use up my time. And then they tell me I have to talk briefly. And when they said that, Dr. Anderson leaned over to me and whispered, "Is it possible?" I don't know just what he meant by that. I wonder how many of you ever ate a vitamin. How many of you ever ate a mineral? You see how silly my subject is? It was given to me by somebody else. We don't eat those things. What do we eat? We eat apples. We eat cabbage. We eat oranges. We eat celery. We eat peaches. Sometimes we don't eat the peaches, of course. We eat lettuce. We eat nuts. In other words, we eat foods. And what are they? They're rather complex materials that are made up of simpler substances, among which are some vitamins and minerals. But vitamins and minerals alone are not very important. We read very much today about vitamins, particularly do the people who are selling us synthetic vitamins and extracted vitamins talk very learnedly about vitamins and about what vitamins do and what they don't do in the body. Actually, a vitamin in a vacuum is valueless. Vitamins are valuable only in association with food elements. Vitamins are not supposed to be foods, and as their behavior is described to us, they seem to be nothing more nor less than an enzyme. Instead, however, of them doing something in the body uses vitamins with which to carry on certain of its synthetic activities in building up and in maintaining its tissues. Somebody's always shooting at me. And the same is true of minerals. A mineral by itself means nothing. It is only valuable in association with other materials with which it forms or is used to form certain tissues and certain cellular constituents of the body. And for this reason, no element by itself is of any importance. We need to consider our total vitamin, mineral, amino acid, carbohydrate, fatty acid, and water intake, rather than to talk about vitamin C or vitamin B complex or vitamin B1 or vitamin B12. You know, when they ran out of alphabet, they started putting 1s and 2s and 12s after the letters. I believe the time is not far distant when they will begin to re-evaluate all the stuff that they have said and written about vitamins, and they'll discover they don't have so many after all. That some of the vitamins have been named several times by different names, and that they don't do everything that they're said to do. There was a time when we knew nothing of vitamins, and there was a lot of experimenting done in those days with foods. Professor Chittenden of Yale, for example, carried on a rather large and long series of experiments with foods, using soldiers and athletes in his experiments. Well, he had Horace Fletcher in some of these too. And if you go back and read over those experiments and notice the list of foods that he fed to those men, you would be amazed. I'm sure you would be amazed to discover the remarkable results he achieved with his changes of diets without giving any consideration to factors that were then unknown, and factors that in the diet he then gave in his experiments would now be considered practically non-existent, or at least greatly deficient. To take soldiers and athletes and change their diet and increase their strength and increase their endurance and increase their health with a diet that is lacking in food factors that we are today making so much fuss about, would seem to me to indicate that perhaps we're making entirely too much fuss about these things. That we need to consider not individual food factors, but our total food intake. Not that we should cease fragmentizing our foods and learn to eat foods as a whole, and learn to recognize, too, that no food factor is more important than any other. We learn about the various vitamin Bs, vitamin B1, B2, B12, B this and B that, and you can be anything you want to, but the point I want to bring out is that these vitamin B factors are no good separated from each other. You have to take the whole vitamin B complex in order to really get any value out of it. And this is the point you need to learn about all your foods. You need to take it all together. There's no value in building bone to take a lot of extra calcium into your body if you do not have at the same time adequate quantities of phosphorus to go along with it, and adequate quantities of the particular vitamin needs to enable you to assimilate both the calcium and the phosphorus. Add to your calcium intake and neglect the intake of the associated factors, and you don't increase your bone building. Or add to your vitamin intake without increasing the intake of the associated food elements that these vitamins enable you to assimilate, and you still don't make any use of the vitamins. It is for this reason that we need to eat whole foods. We aren't doing that today. Even those of you, not perhaps those of you here, but great many thousands of people in these United States today who know a little bit at least about the value of whole foods and who have learned something of the values of vitamins and minerals in their diet, are not eating whole foods. On the contrary, they're eating foods that are just as badly denatured in one direction as the conventional diet is denatured in another. You think of white flour as a denatured food, but you imagine that wheat bran is not a denatured food, but it's not whole wheat, and many of the elements of the wheat have been removed from it. It is just as much a denatured food as is white flour. You think that white rice is a denatured food, but rice polishings are not, and yet the greater part of the rice has been removed from those rice polishings. It is a denatured food. You're buying extracted vitamins and synthetic vitamins from your health food stores, and you're taking them, and you think that you're eating a natural diet, that you're eating an adequate diet, that you're eating a wholesome diet, merely because you're adding these vitamins to your diet. Now, you don't need additional vitamins to your diet if you eat whole foods. If you're going to insist on living on white flour and white rice and white sugar and pasteurized milk and all other kinds of denatured foods, then you're going to think that you need additional vitamins. But that isn't enough. More than vitamins have been taken out of those foods in the processing. 75% of the mineral content of the wheat is removed in making white flour. Add a few vitamins. Does that put back the minerals? Of course not. It isn't that merely that you destroy vitamin C and some of the other vitamins in milk when you pasteurize it. You also alter the calcium salts in that milk so that they're no longer available for use by the body. You evaporate the iodine in the milk so that it's gone. You deammonize some of the amino acids so that they're no longer useful. Adding some vitamin to your milk or irradiating the milk doesn't put back the food elements that are destroyed by that pasteurizing process. So it isn't enough that we add vitamins, even if they were good, to our denatured foods. On the other hand, if we eat natural foods, if we eat whole foods, if we eat unprocessed foods, they contain the minerals and the vitamins that our bodies require in adequate quantities and in proper proportions to give us the nourishment we need. Now, I know that I'm going to hear from some of you the statement, well, is that true today when all of our soils are so badly depleted? Yes, it is. If the soil is sufficiently fertile to produce vegetables and fruits, the fruits and vegetables on that soil will be adequate to nourish you, providing you take them, as do the wild animals that live on the same land. If you'll notice the wild animals living on these soils, on the produce of these soils, you will discover that they're vigorous, and they're healthy, and they're well developed. But they don't send their wheat to the mill and have it robbed of its minerals and vitamins. They don't send their milk to the creamery and have it pasteurized. They don't dry the vegetables that grow there and powder them and put them up in pellet form and swallow them as pills. They take the foods as old Mother Nature hands them out. Somebody made the remark here this morning that Mr. Trop said yesterday that all this talk about spraying vegetables is folly. That these sprays, this spraying of vegetables is not necessarily harmful. I didn't hear Mr. Trop say that, but the story's going around. Somebody is going to call him to task for it. I didn't hear him say it. I was sitting here by him when he made these remarks. I heard him say that the thing has been overemphasized, and I agree with him on that. To get the finest of fruits and vegetables so that we will be assured adequate supplies at all times and under all circumstances of minerals and vitamins, it will be necessary that we do something to our soils and improve them. One of these things that will be necessary will be, of course, a return to the primitive method of fertilizing. A method of fertilizing that, so far as we know, man started before the dawn of history and has continued on down throughout the ages to the present time. Only there are parts of the earth, and in this country in particular, in which we got away from it for a time, and I'm speaking now of what is called organic fertilization. But I would like to emphasize a fact that I believe there are many in the audience that will be in a position to verify. And that is this, that organic fertilization alone is totally inadequate to meet the fertilizing needs of the present time. From all parts of the United States, I receive letters regularly from people who are failing with organic fertilizing. They are not getting the results that they have been promised. they're not producing the fruits and the vegetables that they're told will be produced. And they're being forced to supplement that organic fertilization by remineralization. There is a concern out in Kansas, I believe, that advertises that it has the largest organically fertilized farm or garden in the United States. It's a little over 400 acres. Imagine calling that a large garden. The Belgian farms, which are but a few miles south of the city of San Antonio and that are 50 years old, contain 2,000 acres. And for 50 years, ever since the Belgians came to this country and located there and began to produce fruits and vegetables, they have been organically fertilizing that soil. They supply a large part of the fruits and vegetables in the markets of the city of San Antonio. Some of you may take this message back if you want to His Majesty Simon Gould. I'm sure that he'll hear about it before 9 o'clock tonight anyhow. And a few of the other things that have been said and done here. For all the time that I have been in San Antonio, my patients have received some organically grown materials, but I have never made any fuss about it. But what I want to bring to your attention is this. The owners of these gardens tell me that they have discovered from 50 years of experience that they have to remineralize that soil every 3 years, or it goes down, and they can't keep up their production and their standard of their vegetables and fruits. Now, the people of Belgium have never abandoned organic fertilization. And these Belgians brought this practice with them when they migrated to this country 50 years ago, and they're still carrying it on. The people who have that 400-acre tract out there in Kansas who manufacture a food supplement that they call Spring Green put tons upon tons of organic material upon that soil. But in addition to that, they put tons upon tons of minerals of various kinds upon that same soil. And if we are to successfully rebuild our depleted soils, we're going to have to follow that same kind of a program. And the experiences and experiments of Mr. Savage in Kentucky indicate that the most important part of the program is remineralization. To put vegetables, that is, parts of vegetables. Suppose you raise wheat on an acre of land, and you cut the wheat and shock it, and let it mature or dry, and then you thresh it. And suppose you grind up the wheat straw and return it to the soil, and you haul off the wheat and sell it in the market, and people eat it, or the cattle eat it, and the horses eat it, and the chickens eat it. It never is returned to the soil. So what you're doing is returning a small part of what you took away. Oh yes, you can go across the fence and borrow some more organic material from the fellow across the fence and add to your soil, but you're robbing his. You can go to the woods and rake up the leaves and the boughs. You can go to the sawmills and get the sawdust. You can get organic materials from many sources and add to your soil, but you're robbing one soil to enrich another. In the long run, we haven't gained anything. And if we only add part of the vegetables and fruits that are reared on depleted soils, we put back depleted materials with which to enrich the soil. This means that we are going to have to remineralize these soils. Sooner or later, this fact must be recognized. And a recognition of it is growing, not merely among a few people who have known about it for 100 years, but also among those who are engaged in organic gardening. The fact that they get far superior results by remineralizing their soils is dawning upon them, and they're beginning to do it. Even Mr. Rodale now advocates a certain amount of remineralization. I don't know whether I ought to claim credit for it or not, but he did write me a letter and said, Dr. Shelton, I'm beginning to think that you're right about this thing. We are going to have to remineralize. Now, these are a few things. We speak about health from the ground up. These are a few facts that we must learn and must know. And perhaps there aren't 10 farmers in the house. I don't know, but perhaps there are not that many. Maybe there's more than that. Most of you, at least, are not farmers, and you're not going to do any farming. Some of you live in the cities, and about the only thing you're going to grow is a few pot plants. But you can do something to help promote a program of better fertilization of the soil by demanding foods grown properly. The first health food store that was ever established in this world was established by the original Hygienic Society in 1836 in the city of Boston. And they refused to handle anything in that store to sell to the hygienists of Boston unless it had been grown upon soils approved by the hygienists. It either had to be properly fertilized soil or it had to be virgin soil. Now, inasmuch as there is not much virgin soil left in this country, we're going to have to think primarily of the fertilization program. And this is going to eliminate much of the spraying of fruits and vegetables. I am not yet convinced that it's going to eliminate all of it. I know that they tell you that the better the food, the less the insects like it. They won't eat it if it's real good stuff. They just lie down and starve to death if you put out better food. I am not yet convinced of that. They say that it increases the plant's resistance to these insects. Yes, I know it. Some of them have got such grinders that they can cut into hardwood that is so hard that it'll break an axe if you try to cut it with an axe. Yes, we've got woods in the world that are that hard. We've got wood in the world that is harder than the wood that is used to make the drive shaft or propeller shaft in boats. And that is a very hard wood. But there are woods that are harder than that, and insects that can eat into that hard wood, although it'll break your axe if you try to cut it. And I don't believe that improving the fruits and vegetables, the quality of them, is going to make these fellows lie down and die. I know a lot of organic farmers that are complaining because the bugs are still eating their fruits and vegetables. But it is possible for us to have better fruits and vegetables. It is possible for us to have a better supply of minerals and vitamins by demanding better food. If you don't get it, keep up the demand until you do get it. Keep yelling for it. Keep shouting for it. Until the merchants begin to insist upon it in order that they may supply that demand. Keep this thing in mind now, that no food factor, whether it's a mineral or a vitamin or an amino acid or any other food factor, is more important than the others. When you undertake to make concrete, you don't make it out of sand and water. You can mix up as much sand and water as you want to, and all you get is a little mud. And when the water evaporates, what you have left is sand. No concrete. In order to have concrete, it is necessary that you add to that sand and water certain amounts of cement. Your sand, your cement, and your water added together in proper proportions gives you concrete. If you add too much sand, you get a very poor quality and easily broken and fragile concrete. In the same way, in nourishing the body, it is necessary that you have all of the nutritive elements in proper proportions in order that you produce out of it the tissues and the organs of the body as they should be. Not just an excess of this or an adequacy of that, but an adequacy of everything without too much of an excess of anything. Fortunately for you and I, inasmuch as we don't know exactly how much of anything we need, perhaps it may surprise some of you to know this, but it's a fact that the human body has never been completely analyzed. We do not know everything that goes into the making of the human body. We do not know the proportions of everything that goes in there. Nor is it possible for us to know, in our present state of knowledge, exactly how much of any particular element of food we need at any given time. We can know, however, that if our foods are unprocessed, if they're whole natural foods, if they're grown on good soil, they will contain the elements that we require, trace elements, vitamins, and so on. And that if we take a little excess, now remind you I said a little excess, not a great excess, if we take a little excess of one element or another, the body will be able to dispose of that excess without any particular strain to itself or any tax upon its resources. If this were not so, perhaps not more than 1% of the people born into this earth would ever grow beyond infancy. Maybe not even that many. The body is well equipped with means of handling without tax minor excesses of protein or of carbohydrate or of calcium or of phosphorus or of some other element or elements. It is only when we take these things habitually in considerable excess and place a habitual tax upon the body in disposing of these excesses that it is unable to do so without strain and without loss of energy. So don't get a pair of scales and start weighing and measuring the food you eat and eating by chart and compass. I get frequent requests from people who want a table of food analysis. Where can I get a chart that will give me the composition of all the foods? Well, there are such charts, and they're available, and you can get them. And after you get them, if you can find anything to do with them except to adorn your wall, perhaps, you can find something more to do with them than I've ever been able to find. I think they're excellent little playthings for the boys in the laboratory, but in the dining room, they have no business. When you start weighing and measuring your food and worrying about whether or not I'm getting just the exact amount of this vitamin or of that mineral, it won't be long until they'll have you in the nut house. We should try to maintain an attitude of poise and sanity about this question of food. Animals don't study dietetics and get scales and weigh and
measure their food, nor do they consume 3, 5, and 7-course meals.
Let us eat our foods, and let us eat them in such a way that they'll digest. The common method of eating, the conventional mode of eating, is such that there isn't a digestive system in all the earth that can digest the conventional meal with any degree of efficiency. The normal, the natural limitations of the digestive enzymes are absolutely disregarded in our eating practices, so that we are usually walking cesspools full of gas and full of toxins and full of discomforts. Millions of dollars a year are made out of the sale of Alka-Seltzer, Belans, Tums, and various other patent medicines of that type that people take to relieve themselves of the discomforts and the distresses that result from our conventional mode of eating. Now, how do you expect to get vitamins out of your foods and minerals out of your foods, no matter how good those foods may have been when you ate them, no matter how abundant in vitamins and minerals they may have been before you ate them, if they putrefy and ferment rather than undergo the normal process of digestion after you've swallowed them? And yet, our combinations, our food combinations, violate our enzymic limitations, overstep them throughout all walks of life. And we overeat, which leads to fermentation and putrefaction. We drink with our meals, which leads to fermentation and putrefaction. We eat when we're hurried, when we're worried, when we're fearful, when we're angry, when we're excited, when we're jealous. We eat, in other words, when we're emotionally disturbed and upset. We eat when we're fatigued. We eat in the morning and go out for a heavy day of work. We eat when we have fever, when we're in pain and in discomfort. And when we do these things, our digestion is impaired. And when we impair our digestion, we're not nourished by the food, we're poisoned by it. We can take a patient that is eating regularly and normally under the circumstances, I perhaps should say. We can take that patient, every meal is followed by perfect comfort. Everything is going along beautifully. And somebody comes along and disturbs that patient, upsets him emotionally, and within an hour to 2 hours, there'll be abdominal distress. If it happens to be the noon meal, the distress may last until the following day. And then you decide that you want to see what it's all about, and you take a stomach pump and pump out the contents of the stomach, and lo and behold, there is the day's meal eaten at noonday before, still in the stomach and still undigested. All because of emotional disturbances. This fellow wants me to stop. I don't blame him, do you? I wouldn't sit out there and listen at it myself. But eating under these conditions absolutely prevents you from obtaining from your foods, even the best of foods, the minerals and vitamins that you require. Now let me conclude by saying this. Nourishing your body and supplying your body with minerals and vitamins involves far more than merely eating foods that contain minerals and vitamins. It involves eating those foods under emotional and physical and physiological conditions that enable you to efficiently digest, absorb, and properly assimilate the food elements. There are many sources of minerals Mr. Savage in Kentucky gathers together from the various caves there in Kentucky black rock, which I understand is largely shale, and grinds it into a fine powder. But before adding it to the soil, he analyzed the soil to determine just exactly what minerals are most abundant and which minerals are least abundant in the soil and which ones are needed. And he makes up his rock mixtures in such a way as to properly balance the mineral constituents of the soil. Hensel of Germany and Samson Morgan of England used preferably powdered granite. Limestone, phosphorus rock, and many other rocks are used in this fashion. Dr. Lindlar used to go to the steel mills and get the sweepings from the floors in the steel mills and add these to his soil in order to add iron to the soil. But there are many sources of minerals, and they're added to the soil, and by the way, they're not usable by the vegetables the first year they're put on the soil. It usually takes about 3 years for the soil bacteria to properly prepare those minerals for plant utilization.
Question from this side. Who has a question? The gentleman there.
What do I think of spring green? Spring green is the product that is produced off the vegetation that is grown on the farm that I mentioned out there in Kansas City. Hygienists do not endorse and they do not employ, either in their own lives or in the care of their patients, nor do they advise anyone else to use food supplements of any type, no matter what the advertising claims for those supplements may be. What is this about canned foods? Are they good foods? They are not. The only time to eat canned foods is when you can't get something better. There are parts of the country and times of the year when I think you are forced to resort to such things. But don't eat them except under such conditions. Is goat's milk allowed in the natural diet? Yes, for the kid. But not for you. Not for the hygienist. Goat's milk is probably the equal of cow's milk. There isn't any genuine evidence that it's superior to cow's milk in feeding babies, where the mother lays down on the job and refuses to carry out her biological duties. I said refuse. I didn't say she failed.